Life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. Imagine planning the perfect wedding, only to discover the man you love has been hiding dark secrets behind your back. This is a story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimately, justice. A woman's determination to expose the truth forces everything to unravel, revealing not just infidelity, but corruption that could destroy everything. How far would you go to seek justice and reclaim your life? Stay tuned as we take you through a story of deception, heartbreak, and the powerful lessons learned along the way. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to begin today's life story. There was a quiet hum in the air, a soft but constant undercurrent of pre-wedding chaos that only those closest to the bride ever truly notice. Behind the thick wooden door, coordinators were directing the vendors. Guests were arriving in their finest attire, and musicians were setting up for the ceremony. It was a day that was supposed to be one of joy and love. A moment where every detail was perfectly arranged. As all weddings tend to be, everyone was busy with the usual flurry of activity, making sure that everything would proceed without a hitch. But what nobody knew, what James, the man I had been planning to marry for 4 years, didn't know, was that everything was about to unfold in a way he could never have predicted. I stood in the bridal suite, gazing at the pristine Vera Wang gown hung on its hanger behind me. It shimmered softly in the dim light, untouched and ready for its wearer. The dress, which had once been my dream, was not the one I would be walking down the aisle in. Not today, not as James expected. I ran my fingers over the fabric of my black dress, the one I had chosen for this moment. The gown I would walk into the church wearing, but not as the bride James thought he was marrying. My phone buzzed, and I saw another message from Lily, my maid of honor. She had always been my most reliable friend, the one who could be counted on no matter the situation. She's here, front row left side, exactly where you said she'd be. Wearing red. I can't believe he actually did it. I smiled to myself as I read the message. I wasn't surprised. Of course Rachel would be sitting in the front row, wearing the boldest shade of red she could find. Like the dramatic woman she was. It was a statement, one she always liked to make. I could almost hear her voice in my head. The way she had spoken about me. About how different I was from her. How I was mature, sophisticated, not seeking attention like Rachel. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. Just 3 months ago, I couldn't have imagined this day playing out like this. I had been swept up in the usual pre-wedding jitters, planning the perfect ceremony, dreaming about my future with James. We had been together for 4 years, engaged for 1. Everything had seemed perfect. He was a successful corporate lawyer, and I was a museum curator. We had what everyone called a mature relationship, no drama, no games, just 2 adults building a life together. Or so I thought. I shook my head, the memory of those early days with James flashing through my mind. I had believed in the fairy tale, the one where everything fell into place and we had no secrets, no hidden truths. But then I found the invitation. The real invitation, not the formal one we had sent out to 400 guests, but one tucked away in James's desk, hidden under a pile of papers. It was addressed to Rachel, his ex-fiancé, the one he claimed was part of his distant past. The one he swore had no relevance to his life anymore. The one he told me he had moved on from. That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment I began digging, uncovering one lie after another. The secret meetings, the late-night texts, the trips that coincided with Rachel's social media posts from the same cities. The pattern was undeniable. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The man I had loved, the man I had trusted with my heart, had been lying to me. He had been seeing her all along. I pulled myself out of the dark thoughts that threatened to take over. It was nearly 2 p.m., 2 hours until I would be standing in front of James at the altar. I had worked so hard to get here, to make sure everything went according to plan. My plan, not the one in the wedding coordinator's meticulously organized binder. My laptop pinged again, pulling me back to the present. Olivia had sent me a quick message confirming that everything was set. She had been the perfect choice for this role, the one person who could pass for me. At least from the back and in profile. She was tall, with dark hair that matched mine. She had agreed to wear my wedding dress. a dress that should have been mine today, and play the part of the bride. The resemblance between us was uncanny, and I knew she would fool everyone, including James. It wasn't just a performance for her, it was part of my plan to expose everything. I glanced at my phone, checking another message from Lily. She had been keeping an eye on James, making sure he didn't get suspicious. He just asked for you. He's waiting for you. He's about to go into the groom's chamber. Don't let him see you yet. Lily was my eyes and ears outside this room, keeping everything in motion while I prepared. She was ready with the envelope of evidence, just as we had planned. I smiled, a sense of calm washing over me. This was the moment everything was about to change. But this was the moment I had been preparing for months. The evidence was in place. The cameras were rolling, and I had the perfect cover. James had no idea that his bachelor party the night before had been the first phase of my plan. He had no idea that while he was busy celebrating with his friends, I had been executing the most important mission of my life. I checked the time again. It was nearly 3 p.m. My fingers grazed the edge of the invitation I had found months ago. The handwritten note from James to Rachel. Despite everything, I need you there. Front row left side. Some things remain unsaid. The words stung even now. But they had also given me everything I needed to do what I was about to do. The discovery of James's betrayal had shaken me in a way I couldn't have anticipated. It had felt like an earthquake. A seismic shift that cracked open everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the man I had chosen to spend my life with. The moment I found Rachel's invitation was not just a simple betrayal, it was the beginning of a series of revelations that would unravel everything. 3 months ago, I had walked into James's office, intending to surprise him with a dinner I had planned. It wasn't anything grand, just a simple meal to break up our routine. But when I entered, his secretary, Janet, had a strange expression on her face. I almost didn't notice it at first. But then I felt that familiar tug in my gut, a sense that something wasn't quite right. Janet told me he was in a meeting. It was odd, but I let it slide. I'd learned not to question the little things. But there was something about her look that stopped me. I decided to wait for a bit in the lobby, pretending I wasn't bothered by her odd behavior. As I sat there, I saw a familiar figure leaving James's office. It was Rachel. She walked out, smoothing her hair, her posture elegant and self-assured, as if she had every right to be there. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. James came out just moments after, adjusting his tie, completely unaware that I had seen everything. It was a silent moment, but it spoke volumes. My heart pounded as I sat frozen in the lobby, watching Rachel leave. In that instant, everything I had believed about our relationship shattered. James had lied to me for so long, and I had no idea. This wasn't some casual interaction between exes. No, this was something deeper, something secret. I had known James for years, and I thought I understood him, yet here I was, staring at a reality I had never anticipated. It took me weeks to piece everything together. I wasn't one to jump to conclusions. But once that seed of doubt was planted, I couldn't ignore it. I dug. I went through his emails, his phone records, his calendar, and what I found confirmed my worst fear. There were meetings he had labeled client dinners that weren't with clients at all. There were late-night messages that had nothing to do with work. The business trips that lined up perfectly with Rachel's social media posts. He had been lying to me for months, for longer than I could bear to think about. The betrayal didn't stop with just the affair. No, that was just the surface. As I dug deeper, I discovered something even more disturbing. James had been involved in financial fraud. He had used his position at the law firm to manipulate stock markets and influence client investments. All while I was blissfully unaware. He had been playing a game, and I had been his unwitting pawn. The deceit wasn't just emotional, it was financial. And it was far-reaching. But what hurt the most was the way he had led me to believe everything was perfect. We had built a life together. At least in my mind. We'd discussed our future, planned our wedding, shared our dreams, and all the while, James had been secretly weaving a web of lies. A web that only took a single thread to unravel. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt, it was the complete and utter disregard for the trust I had placed in him. All the moments we shared, the memories we created together, had been built on lies. I couldn't let this slide. I couldn't let him get away with it. I couldn't let this man, who had deceived me and everyone around him, think that he could just walk away without facing the consequences. And so, I began to plan. It wasn't just about exposing his affair, it was about exposing everything. The affair was the catalyst. But the fraud was the heart of it. I would not only reveal his betrayal to the people who mattered most, his family, our friends, the guests at the wedding, but I would ensure that the truth came out in the most public way possible. The plan was simple in concept, but complicated in execution. I needed to find a way to gather all the evidence, to ensure everything was in place without James suspecting a thing. That's when I enlisted the help of Olivia, an actress from my cousin's theater company who looked enough like me to fool anyone from a distance. The resemblance was uncanny, same height, similar build, and most importantly, she understood the role she needed to play. She wasn't just an actress for the wedding, she was a crucial part of my plan to take everything James had built and bring it crashing down. Olivia was the key to my entrance. The perfect cover. No one would ever suspect that she wasn't the real bride. But I had a much grander plan in mind. One that would ensure James would never forget the day he thought he could deceive me and walk away unscathed. The day had arrived, the day I had been preparing for in silence. The day I would expose everything. James had no idea. His nerves were evident, even from the moments before the ceremony began. He had spent the last few hours checking his phone, adjusting his cufflinks, and rechecking his reflection in the mirror. He thought everything was going according to plan. He was about to marry the woman he thought he loved. And Rachel, sitting front and center, was just another guest in the crowd. Her red dress a statement of defiance that James didn't fully comprehend. Meanwhile, I stood in the back of the church, hidden away, waiting for the right moment. The air was thick with anticipation. The guests seated, the string quartet playing soft pre-ceremony music that had been chosen by James and me in an earlier, happier time. But the music, the atmosphere, and the elegance of the venue, all of it, was merely a stage for something far more dramatic. I watched as Olivia, dressed in my wedding gown, entered the church and walked down the aisle. Her every movement was deliberate, practiced, and executed flawlessly. She moved with the grace of a woman who understood the magnitude of what she was doing. She wasn't just playing the role of the bride, she was part of a performance that would change everything. The guests, of course, didn't know the difference. They only saw a beautiful bride making her way toward the altar. James was watching her, his face softening as he expected the usual moment of awe. It was clear in his eyes. He was seeing the woman he thought he was marrying. I could almost hear his thoughts, his relief, his smug satisfaction. But little did he know. Everything was falling apart. He just didn't see it yet. I stood there, hidden behind a pillar, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. I had prepared for this moment, planned every detail, but still, there was a certain coldness in my chest as I waited. A feeling of loss, of finality. As I realized that all the love I had once felt for James had been replaced by something darker, something much closer to justice. I wasn't doing this for revenge. No, this was something deeper. This was about exposing the lies. About making sure the truth came to light. As Olivia reached the altar and took her place beside James, my heart raced. I could hear the minister speaking, his voice echoing softly through the church. The words were almost drowned out by the noise inside my head. The anticipation of the next steps in my plan. Then, it happened. Rachel, sitting in the front row, began to shift in her seat. Her eyes locked with James's, and I could see the subtle signal pass between them. She was about to make her move. This was the moment she had been waiting for, her chance to show everyone how in love she and James were. How they were meant to be. I had expected this. I had known it would happen. But I also knew that everything was perfectly in place. As Rachel stood, her dramatic red dress catching the light, the church fell into a brief hush. She cleared her throat, looking towards the altar. There was a tremor in her voice as she spoke. I must speak, she said, her hand clutching the small clutch purse she had brought with her. I felt my stomach tighten as she continued, launching into her well-rehearsed speech. She was about to claim that their love had never died. That James and she were meant to be together. And she had proof. She pulled out a photo from her purse. A photo of them during their first engagement. It was the moment she had been planning for months. The dramatic confrontation at the altar. But as Rachel's voice rang out, it was not the only thing that filled the room. The church's projection screens flickered to life. The first image appeared on the screen, security footage of James and Rachel meeting in his office just days ago. The image was grainy but clear enough. Then came another. Footage of their secret hotel rendezvous during one of James's supposed business trips. The audience gasped as more images filled the screen, texts between them. Messages exchanged under the cover of secrecy. I could hear the shocked murmurs rippling through the crowd. Rachel froze mid-sentence. Her words suddenly lost as she realized what was happening. The truth was being exposed. But it wasn't just the affair that was being revealed, it was everything. Every secret, every lie. And then, as the minister stood frozen, unsure of what to do next, I stepped out from behind the pillar. My black dress, a sharp contrast to the white gown everyone had expected, caught the light. The gasps from the guests were immediate. They turned, eyes wide in disbelief as I walked down the aisle. This wasn't the bride they had been expecting. This was a woman who had spent the last few months piecing together a truth that James had tried to bury. I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the one who had orchestrated the ending. The final piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. And James, standing at the altar, was about to realize that the woman he had deceived was far stronger. Far more determined than he could have ever imagined. The room fell silent as I approached the altar. My footsteps echoing softly against the marble floors of the church. James's eyes, wide with shock, darted between me and Olivia, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. His perfectly crafted world, the one built on lies and deception, was crumbling before him. Piece by piece, I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. It wasn't the triumph I had imagined in my mind. There was no rush of joy. No sense of victory. Instead, a deep, unwavering calm washed over me. The truth had been exposed. And now it was time for the consequences. As I stepped forward, I could see James's face drain of color. His carefully cultivated persona, the one that had made him the youngest and most promising partner at his law firm, was evaporating before everyone's eyes. The guests, who had come expecting to witness the society wedding of the season, were now witnesses to something far more spectacular. They were watching a man's life, his career, and his reputation unravel in real time. I stood before him, my gaze steady and unwavering. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. He had no defense. What could he possibly say? His betrayal had been laid bare for everyone to see. The affair, the lies, the corruption, everything. It had all been exposed. And now it was time for him to face the consequences. James, I began, my voice calm but firm. You've spent months trying to deceive me, trying to hide who you really are. But you've forgotten one thing. Truth has a way of coming to light. No matter how much you try to bury it. He tried to speak again, his voice shaking, but I raised a hand, signaling him to stop. There was nothing left to say. The evidence was already in front of him, on the screens. In the guests' eyes, in the shocked silence that hung in the air. Behind me, the screens continued to flash images, photos, text messages, security footage. The affair between James and Rachel was just the beginning. As more and more images appeared, the audience began to understand the full extent of the betrayal. They saw James's secret meetings, his shady business trips, the texts he had exchanged with Rachel in the dead of night. They saw the financial transactions, the insider trading, the web of deceit he had spun to line his pockets at the expense of his clients, his colleagues, and me. Each new revelation was like a knife to James's carefully constructed image. He had built a career, a reputation, a life on lies, and now it was all falling apart. His face twisted in horror as the full scope of his actions became clear. He tried to backpedal, tried to explain himself, but there was no going back. The truth was out, and it wasn't just the affair that would destroy him, it was everything. As the footage continued to play, I felt a sense of finality. This wasn't just about me. It wasn't about revenge, though I would be lying if I said that the satisfaction of seeing him exposed didn't give me a sense of relief. No, this was about justice. It was about making sure that someone who thought they could manipulate and deceive their way through life was held accountable. I looked toward the back of the church, where I knew Marco, the private investigator I had hired months ago, was waiting in the shadows. His job had been to gather the final pieces of evidence, footage of James's corrupt activities, conversations that no one else had been privy to. It was his information that had sealed James's fate. I turned back to James, whose face was now pale, his confidence shattered. "You didn't just betray me, James," I said, my voice cutting through the tension in the room. "You betrayed everyone who trusted you. Your clients, your colleagues, your family, and you thought you could get away with it." His eyes flickered, trying to find an escape. But there was none. "You should have known better," I continued, my words now a steady rhythm. "I'm not some naive woman who can't see through the lies. I'm not someone who will stand by and let this kind of betrayal go unpunished." As I spoke, I noticed Lily, my best friend and confidant, standing near the back of the church, the envelope of evidence in her hands. The plan had worked perfectly. The evidence was in the right hands, and the right people were in position to ensure that James would face the full force of the law. James's downfall was complete, and though I felt a deep sense of satisfaction, a part of me couldn't help but mourn the future we would never have had. The love I had thought we shared had been nothing more than a facade. And as the truth came to light, so did the painful realization that I had never truly known him. But I would move on. I had to. As the room settled into a stunned silence, I watched as the reality of the moment hit James fully. His world, the one he had carefully crafted through lies and deceit, had crumbled entirely. The truth was no longer just something hidden away in the shadows, it was right in front of him. In the eyes of everyone he had tried to manipulate. It was done. There was no escaping the consequences now. I turned to the congregation, my voice steady and calm as I addressed them. "This," I said, my gaze sweeping across the crowd, "is what happens when you allow yourself to be consumed by greed and lies. This is the price of betrayal. And no one is exempt from facing the truth." I paused for a moment, allowing the weight of my words to sink in. The truth always finds its way to the surface, no matter how deep you try to bury it. As the security moved in to escort James out, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. The anger, the hurt, it was all fading away. What remained was the knowledge that I had done what was right. Not just for me, but for everyone who had been affected by his lies. In the days that followed, James and Rachel were both arrested, facing charges that would change the course of their lives forever. The media coverage was intense, but I didn't care about the headlines. What mattered was that justice had been served. The lessons learned from this experience would stay with me forever. Life had a way of teaching us what truly mattered: love, trust, and integrity. And sometimes, you had to fight for those things, even if it meant losing everything you thought you knew. If you want to hear more life-changing stories, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for new updates.